I first noticed something was wrong the night the floorboards groaned beneath a weight that wasn't mine. I had been poring over faded letters in the lamplight, the air in my flat tasting of old paper and rain-soaked cobblestones, when the knock came, a soft, deliberate rap against the hallway door. My heart jerked, though I lived alone. The hallway beyond was empty, but at its end, where the flimsy mirror leaned against peeling wallpaper, I saw movement. My reflection hesitated, as though breath had caught in its chest. And then it didn't copy my raised hand, but lingered halfway, fingers curled. A shiver rattled through me, the temperature dropping so sharply that my breath bloomed in tiny clouds. I approached, footsteps muffled by threadbare carpet, every nerve alight. The mirror's surface smudged with a fine layer of dust, yet the reflection was unnaturally clear. Too clear. I reached out, fingertips grazing the glass's cool face, and the other me smiled, slow and knowing, lips parting to whisper words I couldn't quite hear. I recoiled, heart hammering, but curiosity pinned me in place. Had I imagined the expression, or had that shadow self's eyes glinted with a purpose of their own? The next morning, sunlight revealed fresh footprints scuffing the parquet, leading up to the mirror and back, though the rain had washed away any sign of a visitor at the door. My rational mind sketched explanations, drafts, shifting foundations, but beneath rationality, a pulse of dread throbbed. I started noticing more. Objects subtly moved, the scent of ozone in the corner of my study, as if a storm brewed behind closed shutters, and always the mirror. Each night, it grew more insistent, calling to me with those impossible reflections. I tried to ignore it, busying myself with work, but the mirror's presence crept into my dreams. I woke gasping, tangled in sheets damp with sweat, and something else, fear. When I glanced at the mirror before rising, my reflection was sweetly complacent. Lips curved into a peaceful smile that felt alien. I wasn't the same in my own skin anymore. I felt hollowed, as though pieces of myself had already slipped into that glass world. Yet I could not turn away. The doppelganger waited, patient as a spider, beckoning me toward a truth I was only beginning to suspect. This thing in the mirror was no mere illusion, and whatever it wanted from me would demand everything I had. I began keeping a record of each anomaly, scrawling frantic notes into a leather-bound journal whose pages smelled of resin and rain. Every night, the mirror forced my eyes open with that groan of shifting floorboards, and I would stumble into its pale glow. I noticed first that its surface felt slightly warmer than glass should, like the skin of something alive. At midnight, when the city outside lay muffled by fog, I pressed my palm to its smooth face and felt a tremor run through my bones, as if whatever existed behind the glass acknowledged my touch. My breath caught at the faint scent of damp earth and something metallic, the promise of lightning before a thunderstorm. One morning, I awoke to find a message etched on the mirror's underside in fine silvery cracks. Remember. The words shimmered as I circled the glass, fingertips tracing the delicate fissures. It was not my handwriting, yet I recognized the curve of each letter. My own when I was younger, and cursive came more easily. A sudden chill filled the room, and the mirror's reflection slid into place. My face pale and wide-eyed, but the eyes were not mine. They glinted with knowledge, as though they had watched me long before I first lived here. My days blurred into restless wandering through antique shops and dusty archives, searching for any history of the building or its former tenants. Most records were lost. The hallways of the registry smelled of mildew and paper that had never known sunlight. But in a brittle ledger, I uncovered one entry. A man vanished without a trace in 1923. Last seen gazing into a full-length mirror. I felt the blood drain from my face, the hairs on my neck prickling with ice. the stakes had sharpened. This was not my first encounter with the mirror, but perhaps my last chance to understand its purpose before I, too, dissolved into its reflection. That night, I drew a circle of salt around the frame, lit a single candle scented with juniper and ash, and whispered questions into the glass. The flame flickered, casting quivering shadows that danced like specters across the walls. From the mirror came a rasping inhalation, a breath not mine, and then the faintest of sighs. My heart thundered. There was no turning back now. Whose voice would come next? And what price would I pay to hear the answer? I woke to the taste of ash on my tongue and the lingering echo of my own voice, calling out in a tone I did not recognize. The mirror stood at the foot of my bed like a silent judge. Moonlight fractured through the cracked window pane, casting jagged lines across its surface. I reached for the candle stub on the nightstand, its wick stubborn and unlit, and felt the room's air thicken as though weighted with regret. Every breath was an act of will. Against my better judgment, I approached the mirror and pressed my palm to its center, where the veins of cracks now spidered into the salt circle's edge. The glass rippled like water disturbed, and I stumbled back, lantern toppling, spilling molten wax across the floorboards. The pooled wax hissed, releasing a scent of scorched pine, and the mirror began to pulse with a pale inner glow. In its depths, I saw not one reflection, but two. Myself and something that looked like me, but older, wearier, clothes dirtied with earth from graves long unmarked. The older me raised a finger and wrote a word on the fogged glass. Forgive. Then the floor groaned, and the mirror's frame seemed to inhale, drawing light and sound into itself. I pressed my ear to the wood, hearing faint, guttural cries. Pleas for mercy, maybe, or warning. Panic flared. I knew this was the point of no return. I could flee, leave the question of the mirror unanswered, but I felt the mirror gripping my mind, a slow pulse tugging me forward. I closed my eyes and let the candle's flame guide my trembling hand. When I looked again, the reflection had shifted. The older self was gone, replaced by a blank space, an absence that felt heavier than presence. My own face stared back, eyes wide with terror, eyes I no longer recognized. I leaned in closer, breath misting the glass, and whispered, "What do you want from me?" Silence answered, but beneath it, I heard the sound of floorboards groaning under an unseen weight, and I understood that the mirror's hunger would not be sated until I fed it my very self. The choice lay before me: surrender or uncover the truth that would change me forever. I spent the next evening gathering every scrap of research I could find, tacking yellowed clippings and torn journal pages to the walls around the mirror, forming a grid of questions and half-answers lit by a single flickering lamp. The air grew heavy, as though the room itself braced for something terrible. I traced the life of the missing man, his wife's letter begging him to return, his landlord's note reporting strange noises, the final police supplement marking the date of his disappearance. Each fragment of truth felt like a blade sliding deeper into my chest. When I looked into the mirror, my reflection watched me with patient curiosity, as if it counted my mounting desperation. I decided to speak aloud the man's name, Edmund Larkins, believing that naming might anchor the spirit I felt locked behind the glass. My voice trembled, and the mirror rippled, bending the candlelight into long, quivering shadows. The temperature plummeted. My breath condensed into icy pearls that fell to the floorboards with a crystalline tinkle. Beneath the shiver of cold, I heard, faint but unmistakable, a second heartbeat. My own, slowed and deliberate, echoing from the other side. With trembling hands, I pressed my journal against the mirror's frame and whispered, "Edmund, if you're here, show me." My reflection tilted its head, lips parting into a sad, rueful smile. And then it stepped forward, pressed its hand to the glass from the inside, and I felt the board behind me groan as though something immense had shifted weight. Panic flared. The salts I poured around the frame yesterday lay cracked, and I realized the barrier was weakening. My goal crystallized. I had to understand its logic before it spilled through. I set about constructing a makeshift barrier of my own. Coils of rope and lengths of chalk-drawn sigils scavenged from the ledger. Every precise line carried the musty scent of chalk dust and wet stone. I chanted words found in a forgotten footnote, phrases half Latin, half prayer, so that I could bind the entity until I unraveled its purpose. The mirror's surface glowed, veins of light crawling beneath the glass like living roots. My voice grew steadier with each verse, though sweat beaded at my temples, and my chest ached with the effort of believing in words barely more than guesses. When I finished, the mirror fell silent. The glow faded, replaced by the dull gleam of ordinary glass. Relief surged, but I hesitated to step back. My reflection gave no answer. I touched the surface one last time, fingers trembling through the rope's coarse fibers, and found only cold, dead glass. And yet somewhere in the quiet, I sensed a question hanging between us. A challenge that dared me to break the barrier or risk being broken myself. I realized then that this was my point of no return. If I shattered the mirror, I might free Edmund, or I might imprison myself forever. Either way, nothing would be the same. I sank to my knees before the mirror, the rope and chalk sigils torn asunder, the scent of powdery chalk and damp rope filling my nostrils. I pressed my palms to the glass one last time and felt heat bloom through my fingertips, alive, urgent, insistent. The air around me crackled with static, like the charged hush before a summer storm, and I heard that second heartbeat again, resonant and slow, as though the mirror itself had a pulse. I closed my eyes, breathing in the smell of wet earth and old paper, and let myself remember who I once was. A skeptical man who prized rationality above all, who believed the past was dead and buried. I opened my eyes to see the reflection smile, and in that smile was every regret I had ever buried, every untold apology, every lost promise. I spoke Edmund Larkin's name as a benediction and a farewell. The mirror's surface rippled, drawing light and shadow into vortices that swirled like restless spirits. I felt a tug in my chest, as though my own reflection reached out to draw me across the threshold. Panic flared, but I held fast. "Go," I whispered. "Be free." The glass exhaled a sigh, low, mournful, and the scene behind it shifted. I saw Edmund stepping back into the world, dusty coat, weary eyes, but alive. In that instant, I realized the mirror's cruel gift. It had trapped him by trapping me, because I refused to forgive the past. As his hand pressed against the inner face of the glass, he winked at me. Not in thanks, but in understanding. And then the pane fractured, splintering into a web of cracks that glowed with soft blue light, and my reflection slipped through the fissures to occupy his place. I staggered as the glass cooled against my skin. A sudden cold spot bloomed at my heart. When the shards settled, I was standing alone before an empty frame. The only thing left was a single crack, curling across the floorboards, humming with possibility. I felt different, lighter, yet haunted by a memory that was no longer mine. In freeing Edmund, I had invited something of me into that silent world. Now I carry both our stories in my bones, a reminder that identity is never fixed, but forged in acts of mercy and sacrifice. And every time I catch my reflection at the edge of my vision, I wonder whether I am the man I once was, or the man I have become. If you felt the chill of this tale, give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to WhisperTales for your next nightly escape into anxious calm.